All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle an idea about evolution that's, well, it's powerful and honestly a little unsettling. It's one of those ideas that once you hear it, kind of changes how you see everything, including yourself.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a really simple question. You'll see how it reveals a ton about how we usually think evolution works. The question is this: why does poop smell so bad?
Well, the answer is pretty straightforward, right? It's pure survival. Think of it like a built-in warning system we inherited. The bacteria in it can be seriously dangerous to us, so it smells bad to us. Our ancestors who instinctively stayed away from it, they were the ones who didn't get sick, who survived, and who passed on their genes. It's a classic case of survival of the fittest individual.
But hang on a second. If evolution is all about this kind of selfish, individual survival, then something doesn't add up. How do you explain altruism? Selfless acts. If every creature is just programmed to look out for number one, these things shouldn't exist. But they do. They're literally everywhere in nature.
So let's dive into this altruism puzzle. We're going to look at a few examples that seem to completely break the rules of individual survival. I mean, look at this stuff. A worker bee will sting to protect its hive, and that act kills it. Worker ants, they're sterile. They give up having kids entirely just to work for the colony. And squirrels, they'll shout out an alarm call, basically screaming, "Hey, predator, I'm over here," just to warn their group. Monkeys will even adopt orphans. These actions make no sense if it's all about personal survival.
Now, the easy answer people often give is, oh, it's for the good of the species. But that doesn't really hold up either. See, for natural selection to work, you need things that make copies of themselves and then compete. Individuals do that, but species? They don't replicate in a way that allows for that kind of selection. A species isn't competing with a copy of itself. So that explanation is out. What is really going on here?
Okay, to get to the bottom of this, we have to rewind. I mean, way back. Billions of years, back to the primordial soup. We need to basically build the story of life from the ground up.
So picture it. Billions of years ago, you've just got these simple, unstable molecules. Blobs, basically, floating around. Now, a very simple law of physics kicks in. Stable things tend to stick around, and unstable things don't. Over millions of years, just by pure chance, more stable and complex arrangements form. And then, the magic moment. An incredibly unlikely accident happens. A shape forms that can pull in other little building blocks and create a perfect copy of itself. This is it, the first replicator. But here's the kicker. The copying process isn't always perfect. It makes mistakes, mutations, creating new, slightly different replicators that now have to compete for the same building blocks.
And this is where things get really wild. Over billions of years, these replicators didn't just float around. In their constant competition, they started building things to protect themselves. Complex survival machines. They built walls, ways to move, ways to find energy. And what are these survival machines? They're bacteria. They're plants, fungi, and animals. They're us.
And you know what? Those ancient replicators, they never went away. They're still here, right now, inside every single living thing. We just call them by a different name today: genes.
And this idea, well, it completely flips the script on evolution. It's called the selfish gene theory, or the gene's eye view. The fundamental idea is that natural selection doesn't really act on the individual animal or the group. It acts on the gene. We, the organisms, are just the vehicles that genes build and use to make more copies of themselves. So let's look at this comparison. The old view says a cheetah is fast so it can survive. The goal is the survival of the organism. But the gene's eye view says something different. It says the genes for speed are successful because they're great at building fast cheetahs, and fast cheetahs are great at passing on those genes for speed. See the shift? The focus moves from the survival of the machine to the replication of the blueprint inside it.
Richard Dawkins, who really brought this idea to the mainstream, put it in this really stark, provocative way. He said, "We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." I mean, wow. It's the idea that maybe we're not the stars of the show. We're just the temporary housing for this immortal code.
Okay, so how does this totally different way of looking at things solve our altruism puzzle? Let's go back to that squirrel. Why on earth would it risk its own life to shout out a warning?
Well, it all comes down to this. You share a lot of your genes with your family.
Think about it. You get 50% of your genes from each parent. On average, you share 50% with a brother or sister, about 25% with a grandparent or an aunt. Your family is basically a walking, talking collection of copies of your own genes.
So now, look at it from the gene's perspective. Let's say there's a gene that makes a squirrel give an alarm call. If that squirrel dies, but its call saves two of its siblings, well, each sibling has a 50% chance of carrying that exact same gene. So from the gene's point of view, it traded one body for a good chance at saving two copies of itself. Or it could save 8 cousins. The math works out. The gene for altruism actually spreads through the population, even if it sometimes costs one of its vehicles its life. And this isn't just some clever theory. We actually see this happen. With those ground squirrels, it's the females who give the alarm calls. Why? Because they tend to live their whole lives near their sisters, aunts, and daughters, their close relatives. The males? They usually leave the group to find mates, so they live among strangers. And guess what? They almost never make the calls. The altruism isn't random. It's aimed squarely at kin.
But of course, it's not that simple. This is a really powerful idea, but it's also incredibly controversial, and it's been debated for decades. So, what are the big criticisms? Well, for one, not everything is about selection. Sometimes genes just spread by pure chance. That's called genetic drift. Another big one is the language. Calling a gene selfish makes it sound like it has a personality or a plan. It doesn't. It's just a molecule following the laws of chemistry. And finally, it's a bit of an oversimplification. It's very rare that one gene does one thing. Genes work together in these incredibly complex networks.
And yet, even though it's a simplification and the language is a bit tricky, the gene's eye view is still an unbelievably powerful tool. It helps us understand the why behind so much behavior in nature, from the most brutal selfishness to the most baffling acts of sacrifice. It gives us a kind of baseline logic for why the world looks the way it does.
Which brings us back to that unsettling feeling at the beginning. If this is even partially true, what does it mean for us? Are we just survival machines, robot vehicles, as Dawkins put it? What does that say about free will, or purpose, or who's really in charge? It's a huge, challenging question, and it forces you to look at yourself and all life in a completely new light.